Welcome back to the DIY audiobook recording of What is Intuition? We're now on chapter 3. How does intuition work? People always seem to want to know the how of intuition. They ask, how does it work? And is this stuff proven? Now it's time to answer the question. How is it even possible to know without knowing how you know? We tend to be aware of the intuitive mode, the intuitive process, when it produces an outcome, some content, decision, or understanding that appears in our awareness, seemingly fully formed, sudden, direct, and whole. But how the heck did it get there? If I have psychic experiences or perceive energy or access precognitive awareness, then what do I need to understand to have those intuitive experiences make sense? In other words, what makes intuitive experience even possible? This chapter will start to answer that. I'm just going to say this at the outset. It's a mistake to try to understand intuition, what it is, how to cultivate it, by approaching it with the assumptions and modalities that belong to analysis. Linear, rational, analytic logic is generally unsuited to making sense of intuition. As we've learned, intuition is holistic, immediate, embodied, transpersonal, and non-discursive, and relies on dynamics of unseen energy. So, if our goal is to understand intuition on its own terms, our approach will have to be a little different. On its own terms, intuitive experience is best explained as a function of relational, contextual, energetic awareness. It's not analytic or rational, but is a whole other way to experience and produce knowledge. Whereas the analytic mode takes things apart to understand them and requires that we label, categorize, and name each part of a thing as part of the process of knowing it, the intuitive mode orients to wholes, systems, and dynamic movement. Intuition senses meaning rather than always articulating it in words and concepts. It produces knowledge through recognizing patterns and resonance. Taking our lead from the intuitive mode itself, it's not my intent to achieve some specific, absolute explanation for the mechanism of intuition. We shouldn't have to conceptualize, analyze, or understand intuition in the same ways we need to understand construction engineering, nutritious recipes, or how the Earth's water cycles work to bring about weather patterns. Remember when I said this wasn't a how-to book, but a why-to? That applies to this chapter too. It's important not to get too consumed by the requirement for scientific proof or validity. Wanting that proof in the first place is a characteristic of a scientific materialist approach to knowledge that I'd like us to resist, at least for the duration of this chapter. In practice, expecting truth and certainty interferes with intuitive experience, let alone with our understanding of what it is and what that says about ourselves, consciousness, and the ways of the world. Instead, my goal is to contextualize, not necessarily define, to create a nest of context into which we can weave or layer ways of understanding, of intuition, and ultimately of ourselves. Regardless of the mechanisms of intuitive experience, what's more important to me is how do we cultivate trust in our intuitive experience? And knowing what we believe intuition is contributes to developing that trust. If we want to cultivate or even just understand intuition, it can help our confidence to know that what we're dealing with is real, which can be a challenge. What we understand about the nature of the world tends to be structured by the dominant paradigms of the day. And today, that's a scientific and mechanistic framework with a baked in assumption that everything can be rationally justified. I think it's helpful if we can tend to those parts of ourselves that have learned to doubt and are skeptical of even our own experiences. These parts feel reassured by an explanation, so I'm going to provide a version of one here. Note that some of this is proven and some of it isn't. I'm asking you to suspend your desire for concrete validation and instead to be with and inhabit the framework I present here. Try it on. We're socialized to want proof. We want to know that what we know and what we are is acceptable. And so, if an explanation helps our brains get on board with accepting intuition as a powerful ally, let's do it. Let's explain intuition. Let's try to understand intuition. An important part of the project of understanding intuition on its own terms is looking for metaphors that might replace the mechanistic metaphysics that uphold linear, predictable, binary reason. I believe there is tremendous value in allowing ourselves to consider the metaphysics that let intuition make sense. So, some of my intent behind framing intuition as a function of resonance and connection is the way that it expands how we understand ourselves and our nature as interconnected beings alive in the world. In other words, intuition on its own terms shows us who we are. It's all so meta. To understand intuition on its own terms, we need an intuitive, holistic, transpersonal way of thinking about consciousness and about experience. Whatever metaphors we choose have to account for the various types of intuitive experience that exist, including energy sensitivity, implicit knowing, and non local intuition. Dance, flow, and garden are just some of the woo friendly metaphors that might work here. These evoke intuition's transpersonal, holistic, immediate, non discursive nature and gesture to the living systems that comprise our reality. But in this chapter, I'm going to suggest we use a quantum metaphor. A quantum framework is an obvious option for speculating about how intuition works because of the involvement of non local knowing, energetic sensitivity, and the entanglement of consciousness. It begins with the assumption that the world is composed of energy and that energy carries information. In other words, energy is not just energy, it's information. As physicists tell us, energy has shape and pattern, which carry information. We can also refer to this framework as Akashic in the lineage of Ervin Laszlo and other teachers who use this language to describe how we are all connected through fields of energy. In the quantum or Akashic dimension, everything is inherently interconnected. The quantum field or quantum vacuum is an energetic field that is the foundation of and gives rise to form. As a field, it is present everywhere, so it's always unified. This is the basis of entanglement and what allows entanglement to exist. It is the ground of all being. The quantum metaphor points to the possibility of nonlinear spacetime and offers a logic of indeterminacy and potential of not yet defined, where uncertainty and probability are the basis of what happens. From this perspective, intuition is an experience of resonance that relies on the potential for human consciousness to transmit and perceive fields and vibrations of energy when received by a self aware receptive subject. The metaphor nudges us to wrap our heads around both and logic and what that means for truth and validity beyond either or. It encourages us to realize that non dual entanglement, ultimate connection, is the context in which the living systems of human and non human consciousness are embedded. With this quantum Akashic woo framework, we have a foundation for understanding intuition on its own terms. Dimensionality. The quantum or Akashic metaphor relies on a basic hypothesis about the universe, that it is comprised of multiple dimensions. While we're very used to thinking in 4D, 3 dimensions of space plus time, call it space-time if you will, quantum theorists make sense of anomalies in the universe by projecting at least 9 functioning dimensions that comprise our reality, and some suggest there are many more. These multiple dimensions of reality are said to coexist in a holographic form, where every aspect of reality exists on every dimension or plane. Taken together, all of the dimensions comprise the Akasha, the unified field in which everything, absolutely everything, exists. This framework suggests that out beyond 4D spacetime is a domain of unseen dimensions in which all matter is undivided, flowing in a universal flux, a quantum soup or Akashic field. Scientist and philosopher David Bohm called this domain the implicate order. Here, I'll also call it the unseen dimension and sometimes the Akashic field. This is the domain of potentiality, where everything is entangled, instantly interconnected, where there is no form, just consciousness. In the Akashic field, time and space unfold together in a self organizing whole. Everything and every event occur together simultaneously, already entangled or enfolded and nested within itself. The implicate order applies to both matter, substance, and consciousness. Everything is enfolded into itself and each other, and as things become manifest, which not everything does, they emerge from this cosmic soup. As Amit Goswami writes, form is manifested in a specific way when a possibility is chosen and collapsed into actuality, manifest reality. In this sense, the physical form of a thing is not distinct from its energetic form. Are you still with me? Think of a spectrum of existence from potential to actual. Everything is energy. It's all already in existence, though not necessarily manifest, more like on a spectrum of manifestation from subtle to dense. On the dense end, matter is coherent and manifest enough to be perceived or physically sensed. On the subtle end is the vast, vibrating, pulsating soup of potential that we generally don't perceive at all. All things exist in the multidimensional universe. At least they exist in a state of potential. This is why we can say that things are both discrete and entangled. The closer things are to being material and solid, the more discrete or specific they are. The more solid, the more boundaried. This is true for objects as well as for ideas and intuitive content, thought, dreams, visions, etc. The concept of multiple dimensions of existence is not recent. Many ancient spiritual traditions propose the idea of multiple planes or states of reality, including the physical, mental, astral, and causal. All of these are always present, even when we're unaware of them, because we typically focus our attention on local 4D spacetime. After all, our consciousness is attuned to perceive a limited spectrum of information. The unseen Akashic dimensions exist in a range beyond our usual perceptual abilities, so we don't typically perceive them. But while it's impossible to perceive all of these dimensions with the sensory tools we have, we shouldn't assume that the unseen dimensions aren't real or relevant. Instead, we should understand that everything we can see, smell, touch, or perceive with our senses may be only a small slice of what exists or could exist. Entanglement, aka connection. A key idea about the Akasha is the innate wholeness and interconnectedness of the universe. Here's how that works. We tend to think that the world is made up of matter and energy, but the quantum framework adds another layer. When we look very closely at the atomic scale, matter is energy. Quanta are the smallest known packets of energy in the universe. Quantum entanglement refers to the way that systems that interact in any way remain connected, even after they've been moved apart, even by massive distance. Einstein and his contemporaries reckoned that entanglement was nonsense. He called it spooky action at a distance. Since that would mean particles are basically communicating faster than the speed of light, which at the time was thought to be impossible. But guess what? The current science of non-locality tells us that paired electrons are affected together, even if they are no longer linked spatially. Non-locality demonstrates, quote, the fundamental interconnection of everything at the quantum level, such that faster than the speed of light, communication, interaction is implied between subatomic particles separated in spacetime by vast distances, end quote. In other words, quanta remain non-locally entangled. Particles remain entangled no matter how great the distance, and this remains true not only for super small quantum things, all things are entangled. All things are instantly interconnected. This applies to physical objects, to consciousness, to everything, because everything is, at its root, quantum. Whether in the manifest world or in the unseen dimensions, the very nature of life is entanglement, connection, interaction. After all things are what they are through their interactions. As an example, on the material plane, we can consider any plant taking in carbon dioxide from the air animals have exhaled and using sunlight to create its physical form, the substance of its leaves, roots, flowers. The plant then releases the oxygen we need to live. This is intraactive respiration that goes beyond interdependence. It's synergistic, with the physical structures of plants serving as food for other life forms that also breathe, and on and on. In the Akashic domain outside of space-time, entanglement means that information can come through the unified field into individuals' perception, bypassing time and space. Each unit of information overlaps with the past and with the future at the same time because it's all simultaneously. And no signals or mediation are required for this communication to take place. In other words, it's immediate. We can use the idea of entanglement to start to explain how it's possible to know things outside of time and space, how it's possible to know another's mind, or how it's possible to foresee or foreknow without any discernible clues. In the quantum field or Akashic dimension, things are not separable, including the object and subject of knowledge. Energetic sensitivity and the embodied self. It's no coincidence that vibe is a synonym for intuition, but there's a need to clarify our vocabulary because when it comes to intuition, vibe can mean multiple things at once. You've likely heard slogans appealing to good vibes, evoking the Beach Boys and the flower power hippie culture of the 1960s and 70s. Back then, vibe referred mostly to mood or affect, a feeling. But the hippies were also, knowingly or not, talking about energy. Because after all, what creates an atmosphere or mood that other people can pick up on, that can linger in a room, even after the people who were arguing have left it? Patterns of vibrations. Merriam-Webster defines vibes as a distinctive feeling or quality capable of being sensed, sensible but intangible. Vibes are an experience of shared resonance between parts of ourselves, between people, between anything really. As a synonym for intuition, vibes make sense since we're talking about something that involves energy and emotion as well as interpersonal, interconnected, psychic forms of affect. We know vibrations through their movement. We sense their flow and oscillation through resonance. That's why yes vibes feel different from no vibes, and why we can register what we want and don't want through tells like tingles, a sense of expansion, innervation, rushes, etc. This sensitivity is a fundamental feature of organism. Of course, we can't do this without a body. Resonance is a physical, sometimes sensible way our bodies register and relay connectedness, part of the human sensory system. It's not radical to say that humans resonate to vibrations. Our bodies are equipped to register a range of wavelengths that let us know about and communicate with our surroundings and each other. Light, heat, and sound waves are all examples of information carried on vibrations. Brainwave readings, EEGs, have demonstrated vibrations registered in the brain that align with particular states of consciousness. Some are responsible for the deep relaxation we experience in sleep. Others correspond to a trippy psychedelic set of experiences. These waves are created by coherent, aka synchronized, patterns of electrons, neurons firing in synchronization, moving together. Other animals generate and perceive vibrations too through various diverse electromagnetic capabilities. Eels can perceive objects via self-generated electrical fields, even in the dark depths of the ocean. Birds and butterflies' migrations are guided by internalized electromagnetic maps. As living organisms, we are all made up of many dimensions of consciousness, including instinct, affect, biochemical responses, unconscious and subconscious layers. Resonating to our surroundings, maintaining more or less porous boundaries, our bodies and minds register and transmit unseen energies through vibrations all the time. Embodiment is the vehicle through which we can experience our entangled, non dual reality.